So I'm going to take you outside the Boulder bubble to how birth happens in the rest of the U.S. So I have 2 children, and we did it pretty standard the first time. We went to the hospital, and everything that you can imagine went wrong that could possibly go wrong with a birth when they treat it as if it's an illness. And so when we left, we're like, oh, what do we do? It was tragic. It was really rough on my wife, and I'm going to whisper this part because my 11 and 13-year-old are in the room. We didn't have sex for 6 months. So my wife is like, we have to do this different. I'm like, I'm all in, honey. Let me know what to do. She's like, well, this is the East Coast. This is 11 to 13 years ago. She's like, I heard this idea that you can do this at home. This is our fresh idea. I know this is normal to people in Boulder, but where we were from, this was like, you're doing what? Are you crazy? But we went all in. So we went and we found a midwife center, which was like an hour away, because that was as close as you could manage. And we went through all these classes around what are you going to do and what are the emergency plans and all of these things. And then we met the group of midwives that we're going to work with. And the common factor between all the midwives, as best I could tell, is that they all sounded like they'd had frontal lobotomies. You couldn't shake them. Everything was just fine. Everything was nice. And I'm a very type A person, and we were living on the East Coast, so nothing about the birth process, as far as I could tell, was fine and was never going to be fine. But I looked into everything. I read everything I could find because that's how you prepare, right? So we got a birth tub because that supposedly makes it easier. And I don't know if you know what a birth tub is, but the idea is you fill up a swimming pool with hot water in your house. Great idea. And that makes it easier on your wife. And I'm like, we have to make this easier on my wife because that was a shit show at the hospital, and I'm going to be responsible for this. So we're getting closer. We've done all the things we're supposed to do. And 2 a.m. in the morning, boom, I get woken up. She's like, my water broke. I'm like, what do we do? She's like, call the midwife. I called the midwife, and she's like, oh, I'm at another birth. I'm like, okay. I'm like, what does that mean? She's like, well, I'm sure you'll have plenty of time. I'll finish here, and then I'll come to you. She's like, and the birth assistant will come too. And I'm like, okay, when? She's like, well, she's at another birth too. I'm like, okay. She's like, well, remind me how long it was that your wife was in labor the first time? And I'm like, 8 hours. She's like, it's normally half. You'll be fine. I'm like, okay. I'm like, call me when you're on your way. An hour and a half comes by, and my wife the contractions are getting closer and closer. And for those that don't know and haven't had children, like when you pass the 5-minute mark, that's when you go to the hospital. We're at 3 minutes. We're at 2 minutes. I'm on the phone with the midwife again, and I'm like, help? And she's like, okay, I'm cleaning up here. I'm on my way. And I'm like, where are you? She's like, outside of Arlington. I'm like, oh, God, that's 45 minutes away. Okay. So she's driving, we're all good, we're breathing like we learned in the class. I'm not doing anything because I'm a nervous wreck. My wife's doing everything. And then she turns to me and she's like, you should call the midwife. And I'm like, call the midwife. I'm like, why? She's like, tell her the baby's coming. And I'm like, ah! She says the baby's coming. And in her frontal lobotomy voice, she says, oh, great, you get to catch a baby. I'm like, no. She's like, well, tell her to breathe and maybe I'll be there. I'm like, where are you? She's like, I'm driving up 16th Street. I'm like, so I'm on the phone with her and I'm like, she says breathe. And my wife's like, okay, because she is loving and she's trying to slow this process down just because her husband's a nervous wreck, which I love her for. And I'm on the phone and she's like, she drives by the house, but it's one-way streets in Washington, D.C. And she's like, oh, I missed your street. I'm like, oh. So at this point, it's happened so quick that tub is 1/4 full of water. We never got to use the tub. We ran out of hot water. I had even pulled the hot water taps out of the washing machine so that we could fill it quicker and drain the hot water tub. So we have a 1/4 full tub of hot water. We have a wife that's about to give a baby, and we have a nurse that's circling. So I scream at her, just park illegally, I will pay for the ticket. And my wife is breathing, and I hear her steps coming downstairs, and right as she walks into the door, I do one of these. And Max, our second son, was born 7 to 10 seconds later. Very stressful. But at this point, things start to calm down. We have a beautiful baby. We're at home. We don't have to deal with doctors. We're in the comfort of our own home. At this point, the doula assistant shows up and decides she's going to help wash some things. She puts them in the wash machine to wash. She turns it on, and sure enough, the entire laundry room fills with water. And I don't know how many people have been through a birth process, but it's not clean water. And it's just flooding the laundry room. But none of us noticed this because we're all like, oh, thank God nobody died. We didn't have to go to a hospital. We made it through. And then the midwife looks over and she goes, oh, there's water coming out of your laundry room. And I shift into, well, here's something I can do, because I've been completely worthless through this whole process. So I spend the next 2 hours trying to clean that up and cutting out drywall while my wife is sleeping in the bedroom. But it did, I guess, work out in the end because both children are up here and they're both alive and healthy. And so, thank you.